It all started on a night I had been planning for weeks, hoping it would bring us closer together. I showed up at Monarch Plaza Hotel to pick Candace up after her seminar, feeling like I was about to surprise her in the best way possible. I had a bottle of wine in one hand and a small gift in the other, something I'd put a lot of thought into. It wasn't just any gift, it was something I knew she'd love. A small but meaningful token to show her how much I appreciated her. We'd been through a lot lately, work stress, my long hours, her business trips, and I thought it was time for something to remind us both of why we were together. But the moment I saw her, something went wrong. I arrived a little early, wanting to beat her out of the seminar and surprise her as she walked out. As I stood at the corner of the lobby, the crowd of people filtering out of the event didn't seem too different from any other. But then I saw her. Candace. She wasn't alone. She was walking out with a man holding his hand. A man I'd never seen before, but whose gray suit was so familiar. I recognized it from photos she'd shown me of her business conference just days before. The man wasn't just anyone. It was him, the one she'd been talking about a lot. Her colleague from the seminar, the one who seemed to get more and more praise every time she mentioned him. The one she'd claimed had been helping her with the complex negotiations she'd been working on. My heart stopped. I froze in place, feeling like the world had shifted beneath me. I didn't move. I couldn't move. My eyes followed them as they laughed, walking toward the valet. The man's hand rested in hers, and though it wasn't a passionate grip, it felt far too made for just colleagues. There was something in the way they moved together that made me feel like I was intruding on something more than a professional bond. I couldn't let them see me. I didn't want Candace to know that I had witnessed this. Instead, I stayed hidden behind a pillar, watching them from the corner of the lobby. I felt like a fool, standing there with a bottle of wine and a gift, as if I was playing the role of the loving boyfriend when in reality something wasn't right. There was a strange mix of disbelief and panic in my chest as I watched them leave the hotel together. They reached her car, and I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the way they smiled at each other, it wasn't just friendly. It wasn't just colleagues. It was something else. I told myself I was just overreacting. I had no proof, no solid reason to think anything was going on. Maybe I was paranoid, maybe I was imagining things. But in that moment, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Deep down, I knew this wasn't normal. Something had changed between us recently, and it wasn't just the stress of our busy lives. I didn't confront her right away. I didn't say anything when she came home later, smiling and bubbly as if nothing had happened. She was sweet and apologetic, making small talk about the seminar. I smiled back, trying to hide the knot forming in my stomach, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. We sat down to dinner, and Candace didn't seem to notice the quiet tension in the air. I wasn't even sure if I had been imagining it. Could I have been wrong? Was I just seeing things? But then, the next night, it happened again. Candace was out late again. She had claimed it was another late-night work event, another seminar or dinner meeting with colleagues. But this time, there was something different about the way she was acting. She seemed distracted, almost absent, like her mind was somewhere else. I didn't press her, I trusted her, even though that trust had been shaken in the past few months. When she finally returned home late that evening, she seemed unusually flustered. Her makeup was slightly smudged, and she was acting a bit too hurried to change into her comfortable clothes. There was a nervousness in the way she moved, like she was trying to cover something up. I wanted to ask her where she had been, who she had been with, but the words didn't come. I felt like a fool for even questioning it. I had no reason to believe anything was wrong. She was a successful woman, busy with her career, and I didn't want to be that insecure boyfriend. But then I found it. I was looking through her bag a few days later, grabbing some paperwork for a meeting of my own, when I found a key I didn't recognize. It was a key to an apartment. A second apartment key, one she claimed to have lost months ago. My heart raced as I picked it up, my mind spiraling into thoughts I didn't want to face. She had told me that she had lost the key months ago, and yet there it was, sitting in her bag like a secret I wasn't supposed to know about. I had no idea what to make of it. I tried to push it out of my mind, but it was hard to ignore. What was she hiding from me? Why hadn't she told me about this key? Why hadn't she mentioned this apartment? I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I waited. My mind was racing, and I couldn't seem to slow it down. I was questioning everything. Had I been blind to what was happening? Had I let myself believe too easily? The small cracks in our relationship were beginning to feel like gaping holes. Later that evening, I casually brought up the key. I didn't want to seem too accusatory, but I couldn't hide the suspicion in my voice. "Candace, what's this key?" I asked, holding it up. She looked at it for a second, then took it from me as if nothing was wrong. "Oh, that? It's nothing. she said, brushing it off with a smile. It's just a colleague's apartment. He lent me a key because sometimes it's easier to meet for work stuff there, instead of the office. Her explanation was smooth, confident, almost rehearsed. It didn't make sense. If it was nothing, why hadn't she told me about it earlier? Why was she acting so casual about something I knew she had lost? I pushed it aside for the moment. Maybe I was just overthinking things. I had no proof that anything was wrong. No concrete evidence to accuse her of anything. She was right. She was just doing work. It was fine, right? Still, the uneasy feeling lingered in my chest, gnawing at me, as I tried to push my doubts away. The next day, the uneasy feeling I had brushed aside began to fester in my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen at the Monarch Plaza Hotel. The strange familiarity between Candace and that man. The way she had brushed off my question about the apartment key. Was I just overreacting? Could I really believe my own suspicions? But then the little things began to add up, and I couldn't ignore them anymore. It wasn't just the incident at the hotel or the key in her bag. Over the past few months, Candace had been acting differently. More distant, more secretive. It wasn't the kind of change I could explain away with a simple, "She's just busy." No, this felt like something else. She had been coming home later and later from work, claiming she was caught up in negotiations or stressful meetings. It wasn't unusual for her to work late, but there was a difference in the way she said it. Her tone had become defensive, like she was preemptively guarding herself against any questions. And when she did come home, she was distracted, barely acknowledging me as I tried to make conversation. I told myself she was just tired, stressed out by her job, but there was a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She started leaving her phone face down on the kitchen counter, which she had never done before. Candace was always an open book with her phone, never feeling the need to hide it or keep it away from me. I wasn't the type of guy to snoop through her messages, but it was hard not to notice that the habit had changed. It was subtle, but it gnawed at me. Then, there was the night she mistyped her phone password while I was sitting on the couch next to her. She immediately flinched when she noticed I had seen it, quickly locking the screen and acting as if nothing had happened. But I saw it. Her fingers had slipped on the digits, and I couldn't ignore how quickly she had pulled the phone away when she realized I was watching. I tried to push the thought out of my mind. I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, what could it mean? People mistype passwords all the time, right? It was nothing. But as the days went on, the small signs kept adding up. I began noticing that Candace was always on her phone more than usual, texting or calling someone quietly when she thought I wasn't paying attention. It wasn't a big deal at first, but the secrecy behind it was unnerving. A few times, I had walked into the living room and found her whispering into the phone, always ending the call quickly when I came into view. At first, I assumed it was work-related. She was a career-driven woman, and I admired that. But it was the change in her behavior that bothered me. She was no longer leaving her laptop unlocked on the kitchen counter like she used to. Candace had always been so careless with it, but lately, she had become hyper-vigilant about it. Every time she stepped away from her desk, her laptop was locked and secured. I began to feel like I was being shut out, like there were things happening in her life that I wasn't a part of, and it hurt more than I wanted to admit. She had always been so open with me, and now it felt like there was this wall between us. I tried to tell myself that it was just stress from work. She was always talking about deadlines and pressure from her bosses. Maybe she just needed space. But deep down, I knew that something was off. One evening, I decided to follow her. It wasn't something I ever thought I would do, but I couldn't take the uncertainty anymore. Candace had mentioned she was going out with a client for dinner, just a casual business meeting, but I wasn't convinced. My gut told me that wasn't the whole story. So I waited until she left, slipping quietly out of the house after she drove off. I kept a safe distance, making sure not to be noticed. The whole time, my heart was pounding in my chest. I tried to tell myself I was being irrational, that I was just overthinking things. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to uncover something I wasn't ready to see. She drove straight to a trendy restaurant downtown, a place I had never seen her go to before. It wasn't the kind of place where she would have a business meeting, not the usual casual spot for work dinners. This was a fancy place, one that I knew had high-end clientele. Candace had always told me she wasn't interested in places like this, preferring more low-key venues. Yet here she was, walking inside with that same man from the hotel, the one I had seen her with days before. I parked a few blocks away and sat in my car, watching them. My mind was racing. What was she doing here with him? They weren't supposed to be anything more than colleagues, right? So why did it feel like this was something more? They sat down at a secluded table in the back, close enough for me to see them, but not so close that they'd spot me. The way they leaned in toward each other, the way they laughed at something he said, the way her eyes sparkled, it wasn't just business. This wasn't just dinner for work. It looked an asterisk, mate. It looked like they were enjoying each other's company in a way that felt far too personal for me to ignore. I couldn't sit there any longer. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, the cold metal feeling foreign in my grip. I wanted to go in there, confront them, demand answers. But I didn't. Something inside me told me that wasn't the way to handle it. If I wanted answers, I needed more than just suspicions. I needed something concrete. I drove home, my mind a blur of emotions, anger, frustration, confusion. I tried to put the pieces together. Candace had always been so careful with her actions, so guarded lately. And now this? It wasn't just a dinner. It was a lie. That night when Candace came home, she acted like everything was normal. She smiled at me, apologized for being late, and started talking about her day like nothing had happened. But I couldn't hear her. All I could think about was what I had seen, the way she had looked at him. It was the same look I used to get when she was in love with me. I wanted to confront her, to ask her what was really going on, but something stopped me. I had no proof. I had no concrete evidence. All I had was a feeling, a suspicion that had started to grow with every little thing I had noticed in the past few months. I went to bed that night with the weight of it all hanging over me. It wasn't the first time I had doubts about her, but it was the first time I had caught a glimpse of something that made me question everything. The next morning, Candace was still distant. She was quiet, avoiding my gaze more often than usual. When we sat down for breakfast, she seemed distracted, and when I asked her how her meeting went, she gave me a half-hearted response. I tried to smile, but inside I felt a deep sense of unease. Was this really just a phase? Or was I starting to see the truth of what had been happening? Later that day, I found something else. In her bag, a business card, one I hadn't seen before, was tucked inside a notebook. I pulled it out and my heart sank. It was the same man from the hotel, the one who had walked out with her that day. His name was printed on the card, T. Banks. I couldn't believe it. What was going on between them? I stood there, holding the card, my thoughts racing. I had no choice now. I had to know the truth. I couldn't keep living in the dark, wondering if I was imagining things. Everything became clear one evening when I was checking the mail. I had gotten used to the quiet, empty evenings spent sitting alone with my thoughts, trying to piece everything together, trying to make sense of the strange tension that had been building in our relationship. But nothing had prepared me for what I found that day. I opened the joint mailbox and was surprised to find an envelope addressed to both Candace and me. The return address was from a financial institution, and I instantly felt a surge of unease. It wasn't a usual piece of correspondence, something neither of us would normally receive. Inside, there was a notice confirming a large transfer of $9,500 from our joint account to someone named T. Banks. My mind raced as I stared at the paper. The name seemed so familiar. It was the same name that appeared on the business card I had found in her bag. The same man I had seen her with at the hotel, holding her hand in the lobby like they were more than just colleagues. My gut twisted painfully as I processed the information. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't something innocent. I couldn't breathe. I turned the paper over in my hands, looking for something that would explain this away. But there was nothing. No explanation, no clear answer, just the undeniable proof of a transaction that I couldn't ignore. The weight of the moment hit me all at once. My mind flooded with questions. How long had this been going on? Was I really that blind? I had trusted Candace, loved her, and given her everything, our home, our future, my heart. How could she betray me like this? I couldn't sit there anymore. I needed to understand what was going on. I had to see the full picture. I quickly grabbed my laptop and started combing through our banking history looking for any clues. There it was again, for transfers in the past 6 weeks, each one to the same person, T. Banks. Each one in the same amount, roughly $9,500. It didn't make sense. It wasn't like Candace to make such large transfers without telling me. I sat there, staring at the screen, unable to process what I was seeing. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. She had been funneling money to him, money from our joint account. It was like an affair with a price tag attached, and it made my blood run cold. I could feel the anger building inside me, but it wasn't just anger. It was betrayal. A deep, crushing betrayal that I couldn't shake off. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what I discovered next. As I dug deeper into her laptop, I found a folder on her desktop labeled CONF Westside. The name of the folder made my heart skip a beat. Westside? That was the name of a rival firm in the financial industry, one I had worked with in the past. I'd also kept my new financial algorithm locked away in my home safe, an algorithm I had worked on for months, something I considered the crown jewel of my career. But here, on her laptop, were the drafts. The drafts of that very algorithm, the ones I had never shared with anyone. I was shaking as I clicked through the files. They were detailed and complex, and they clearly contained information that had never left the walls of my office. I froze in place, unable to move. It hit me with a brutal clarity. Candace had broken into my safe. She had stolen my work and was passing it off to this man, T. Banks, and his company. This wasn't just infidelity. This was industrial espionage. I slammed the laptop shut, my mind reeling. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from beneath me. I had trusted her, given her everything. And now I was finding out that she had been betraying me in the worst way possible. I felt sick. It was the kind of sickening realization that I knew I could never forget. But there was no time for tears, no time for self-pity. I couldn't let this go. I had to act. I had to do something. But it had to be methodical. Calm. I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. I took a few deep breaths, trying to steady myself, and then I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Candace directly. No, this wasn't something I could handle alone. I needed to make sure I had everything in place before I did anything. I wasn't going to give her a chance to cover up what she had done. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into thinking this was just a mistake. I immediately cut off her access to our joint accounts. I changed the passwords, transferred all the funds I could into an account she didn't know about, and locked down all our financial information. I wasn't going to let her take any more of what was mine. Then I moved on to the next step. I knew I needed help, and there was one person I trusted more than anyone, my brother, Alex. He wasn't just my brother, he was a former investigator, a man who had seen it all. I called him up that evening, and as soon as he answered, I told him everything. He didn't hesitate. "You're doing the right thing," he said, his voice steady. "I'll get on it. Don't do anything until I have all the facts." I was relieved to hear his voice. Alex always knew how to stay calm, and right now I needed calm. But I also needed answers. He promised he would look into it and get back to me as soon as he could. In the meantime, I didn't sit idly by. I knew I needed more than just my brother's investigation. I had to make sure Candace's actions were documented, that I had everything I needed to protect myself. So I started gathering evidence. I printed out the banking transfers, the emails, the files I had found on her laptop. I made copies of everything and encrypted the documents, securing them in case anything happened to me. The next few days were a blur of action and anxiety. I could feel the pressure mounting, but I was focused. I couldn't let myself fall apart. I needed to keep my cool. And soon enough, Alex called me with the information I had been waiting for. "Mark," he said, his voice low and serious. "T. Banks? He's already been flagged in a separate economic crime investigation. He's been involved in several cases of corporate espionage. It looks like Candace was feeding him confidential information from your firm for months. I've got photos, timestamps, and a full log of everything." I didn't say anything at first. I just let the weight of it all settle in. My mind was racing, but I couldn't feel anything other than numbness. "We've got everything we need," Alex continued. "Now we can bring this to the right people. But we have to move fast." I took a deep breath, my hand trembling as I held the phone. "Let's do it. Let's bring it all down." We set up surveillance, having Alex's team track Candace's movements and interactions with the man. We followed her to a restaurant she frequented, and there it was, Candace handing off physical documents to T. Banks, meeting him in secret. They weren't just talking shop, they were exchanging confidential information. The betrayal was unfolding in front of my eyes, undeniable and cruel. But I wasn't going to react. Not yet. This wasn't about emotion, it was about strategy. I was going to hit them where it hurt the most, the system they had corrupted. I had everything I needed. The evidence was undeniable. But now I had to be strategic. I wasn't going to allow myself to be swept up in the chaos of anger and betrayal, even though every part of me wanted to lash out, to scream at Candace for everything she had done. No, I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about making sure she faced the consequences of her actions, and that meant playing the game with precision. For the next few days, I focused solely on execution. Every move had to be calculated. I started by cutting off access to all of our accounts. It felt strange, almost like I was severing the last tether that connected me to Candace, but it had to be done. I changed all our bank passwords, reset the security codes for our home system, and encrypted the cloud storage where we had shared important documents. The one thing that still troubled me, though, was the personal element. Even though I was taking control of the financial and legal aspects of this, the emotional side was another matter. As I sat in our living room one evening, staring at the empty space where Candace's things had been for so long, I couldn't ignore the feelings that came rushing at me. Anger, betrayal, but also confusion. How could she do this? How could someone I loved so much turn into someone so unrecognizable? I had given her everything. I had shared my dreams, my life, my heart. But then I reminded myself, emotions had no place in this anymore. This wasn't about love. This was about power, control, and retribution. Candace had made her choice, and now I was going to make mine. I didn't give her any opportunity to fix things. There was no coming back from what she had done. She had crossed a line, and now I was about to make sure she faced the consequences. I wasn't going to let her sweep it all under the rug. No, I was going to make sure the truth came to light. I had gathered everything. The bank transfer receipts, the files from her laptop, the surveillance footage of her handing over confidential documents to T. Banks at that restaurant. I was ready. I called my lawyer, who had already been briefed by Alex on everything I had uncovered. "We're ready to move forward," I said, my voice steady. "I want to hit them both where it counts. We have the evidence, now it's time to act." He didn't hesitate. "I'll prepare the legal documents and file the case as soon as possible. We'll need to alert your company as well. This isn't just a personal matter anymore. This is corporate theft, and it's not going to go unnoticed." The next day, I scheduled a meeting with my company's management team. It was a meeting I never thought I would be in, but now it was a necessity. I showed them everything, every transfer, every email, every file. I told them what had been going on behind closed doors, how Candace had betrayed not just me, but my work, the company, and everything we had built. The look on their faces was a mixture of shock and disbelief, but there was no turning back now. Candace had crossed a line. She hadn't just cheated on me, she had stolen my intellectual property, something I had worked for years to develop. She had handed it over to a competitor, selling out the very company that had helped her rise in the business world. It was only a matter of time before the internal investigation began. I had done everything I could to make sure the company had all the evidence they needed to pursue this as a criminal matter. I wasn't going to be the one to get involved in personal drama. I was done with Candace, and I had made that clear. But this was bigger than us. It was about protecting my work, my career, and my future. The next morning, as I sat at my desk, I received a call from Alex. He had some news. "T. Banks just showed up at Candace's office," he said, his voice clipped. And, well, things got heated. I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't need to ask what he meant. From what I had seen, Candace had been more than just involved with T. Banks. She had been the one feeding him the stolen information. If he was at her office now, it could only mean one thing: he was either trying to cover his tracks, or he knew he was about to be caught. "I'm on it," I said. I didn't waste any time. I knew this was my chance to make sure everything came to a head. I reached out to the management team at my company, informing them that T. Banks had made his way to Candace's office. I wanted them to be prepared for what would unfold next. As the day went on, the atmosphere at the office became increasingly tense. I knew the investigation was underway, and I knew it would soon make its way to Candace. But I wasn't about to let her off the hook. She had betrayed me, and now she was going to face the consequences of her actions. Around noon, I received a call from the security team at my company. T. Banks had shown up at Candace's office and was causing a scene. They had asked him to leave, but before he was escorted out, they found a flash drive in his briefcase containing confidential data, my algorithm. It was everything I needed to seal the case. I couldn't believe it. The man I had seen her with was carrying around the stolen intellectual property I had developed. This was no longer a personal issue, it was now a corporate scandal. Candace's involvement in this was undeniable. That afternoon, I went to the company's headquarters, where a team of investigators had already begun to piece together everything. The audit of Candace's transactions had begun, and the internal investigation was in full swing. She had no idea what was coming for her. The next morning, T. Banks was arrested, and Candace was suspended from her position while the full audit of her transactions took place. There was no turning back now. The evidence was overwhelming, and the company was moving quickly. Candace, however, had remained quiet through it all. She refused to speak with anyone about what had happened. The only thing I had received from her in the last few days was a text message. "I'm sorry, Mark. Please, let's talk. I didn't mean for this to happen." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. She had made her choice, and now it was my turn to make mine. The news spread faster than I had expected. It was like the floodgates had opened, and suddenly I was thrust into a storm of corporate politics, legal drama, and public scrutiny. I had expected the internal investigation to go smoothly, but I hadn't anticipated how quickly it would escalate. The scandal had reached beyond the walls of our company, and whispers of betrayal were now running rampant in the industry. Candace's name was no longer just tied to me, it was now associated with industrial espionage and corporate theft. The internal investigation had turned into something bigger. My company's legal team and the police were involved, and soon enough, Candace's involvement was laid bare for everyone to see. The evidence was overwhelming: bank transfers, stolen intellectual property, and the surveillance footage of her handing over confidential data to banks. It was all there, in black and white, and there was no denying her role in the mess she had created. I had been watching from the sidelines, trying to keep a level head, but everything was spiraling out of control. The phone calls kept coming in, some from the company's management team, others from the media. The news outlets had picked up on the story, and now everyone wanted to know about the woman behind the scandal. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was trapped in a web of lies and deceit, and Candace's name was at the center of it all. But I wasn't going to let her off the hook. No, I had made up my mind. She had betrayed me, but she had also betrayed the trust of the company, of my colleagues, and of everyone who had worked hard to build what we had. I wasn't going to let her slip away without facing the consequences. I stayed away from public drama and media attention as much as I could. It wasn't about making a spectacle of the situation, it was about getting justice. I knew that the company would handle the legal side of things, but I also knew that Candace's actions would follow her wherever she went. This wasn't something that could be swept under the rug. Her betrayal had been far too deep. By the time the police had finished their investigation, Candace had been officially suspended from her position, and the full audit of her transactions had *N. The company was making moves to recover the stolen data, and it was clear that there would be serious repercussions for her actions. She had crossed a line that could never be undone. I never reached out to her. I didn't need to hear her explanations or her excuses. She had already had the chance to explain herself, but instead of telling me the truth, she had lied, hidden things from me, and played a part in bringing down everything we had worked for. Her silence spoke louder than anything she could have said. She knew what she had done, and there was no way to excuse it. Days went by, and the case grew larger. Banks had been arrested, and Candace was facing an internal investigation that could lead to criminal charges. I didn't know how much she was willing to admit, but I knew the evidence was too strong to ignore. She had been caught red-handed. She had sold out everything: our relationship, her career, and the trust one had placed in her. The consequences were inevitable, and they were only beginning. Despite everything, I couldn't shake the feeling that Candace wasn't going to go down without a fight. Her pride was bigger than her guilt. She had always prided herself on being successful, on being the top of her game, and I couldn't imagine her giving up easily. The next day, I got a text from Lily, Candace's younger sister. I hadn't spoken to Lily in a while, but I remembered her well. She was Candace's opposite, in many ways calm, thoughtful, and always the voice of reason. I wasn't sure what she wanted, but I knew that if anyone could help me make sense of the situation, it would be her. "Mark, can we talk?" the text read. "I know you're probably angry with Candace, and I understand why. But I think I can help." I stared at the message, unsure of what to do. I had nothing left to say to Candace, and I wasn't sure I was ready to talk to anyone in her family. But I also knew that Lily had always been level-headed, and if she was offering help, it was worth hearing her out. I agreed to meet her for coffee that afternoon. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, but I needed to understand what was going through Candace's mind. I needed to know if there was any part of her that still cared, or if she had truly lost herself in this mess. When I met Lily, she looked tired, exhausted even. Her face was drawn, and there was a sadness in her eyes that I hadn't expected. She wasn't the type to show her emotions, but it was clear that the situation with Candace had taken a toll on her too. "I'm sorry about all of this, Mark," she said as we sat down at a quiet table. "I know this is a lot, and I know it must feel like everything is falling apart. But I want you to know something: Candace has always been manipulative. I've known it for years. I just never knew it would go this far." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had never thought of Candace in that way. She had always been the one I trusted, the one I had believed in. To hear Lily speak so plainly about her sister was jarring. But it also made sense. The way Candace had acted recently, the way she had seemed to grow colder with each passing day, it was like something had changed in her. And now I realized that maybe it wasn't just stress from work or the pressure of our relationship. Maybe it was something deeper, something that had been festering for years. "I don't know what happened, Lily," I said, my voice hoarse. "But I'm done. I can't keep holding on to something that isn't real. I don't know who she is anymore." Lily nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. "I get it, Mark. But I think you should know this. Candace is already paying a price for what she did. She's going to lose everything. Her career, her reputation, her freedom. But it's not just because of what she did to you. It's because she's been doing this for years. Using people. Lying. It's been her way of coping with everything." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to feel sympathy for Candace, but another part of me was too angry, too hurt to care. Lily was right. She had made her choice, and now she was going to have to face the consequences. As the conversation shifted to more practical matters, we discussed the fund I was launching, a new initiative focused on transparency and ethical investing. It was something I had started thinking about after everything that had happened with Candace. I wanted to build something real, something that could be a beacon of integrity in a world that often seemed to lack it. Lily was eager to help. Her legal expertise would be invaluable in setting up the proper structures for the fund, and her experience in compliance would ensure that everything was above board. We agreed to meet several more times over the coming weeks to get things off the ground. As we parted ways, I felt a sense of relief. Working with Lily was going to be a fresh start, a new chapter. It wasn't going to undo what had happened with Candace, but it was something real, something worth building. I wasn't going to lose myself in the past. I was going to focus on the future. A few weeks after the scandal broke, I found myself at a crossroads. The dust was settling. Candace's suspension had turned into an outright firing, and she was facing the legal consequences of her betrayal. Banks had already been arrested, and while the company was focused on recovering from the stolen data, I had to figure out what came next for me. The business world was watching, the story was all over the media, and my personal life had been dragged through the dirt. But somehow, amidst the chaos, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in months. I knew I had to keep moving forward. I couldn't let Candace's betrayal define me, no matter how deeply it had shaken me. I had worked hard for everything I had achieved, and I wasn't going to let her tear it down. One day, when I least expected it, I received a message from Lily, Candace's younger sister. I had known her for years, and while we had never been particularly close, I always found her to be grounded and sharp. She worked as a legal advisor specializing in financial compliance and transactions, and her reputation for thoroughness was impeccable. I hadn't heard from her since the fallout, so when her name popped up on my phone, I hesitated before opening the message. "Mark, I hope you're doing okay," the text began. "I know things have been crazy, but I wanted to reach out and offer my help. I've been thinking about your new fund, and I believe I could contribute. Let's talk." I read the message several times, unsure of what to make of it. After everything that had happened, the idea of working closely with someone so connected to Candace felt complicated. But at the same time, I knew that Lily had always been different from her sister. I didn't hold her actions against her, and she had always been straightforward with me. If anything, I realized that working with her might help me take back control, both professionally and personally. We set up a meeting. I didn't know what to expect, but when we sat down over coffee, I was struck by how calm and composed Lily was. She wasn't offering excuses for Candace's actions. Instead, she was offering something practical. Support. "I know this has been difficult, Mark," she began, her tone measured but sincere. "And I can't pretend that Candace's actions don't affect me, too. But I want you to know something. I've always been aware of her manipulative tendencies. It's been a pattern for as long as I can remember. I never wanted to believe it, but the truth is, Candace has always been someone who hides behind a facade." I nodded, feeling a knot in my stomach. Her words were a reminder of the painful reality I had already begged *N to accept. Candace had changed, but in ways I hadn't been able to see until it was too late. "I want to help you build this fund," Lily continued. "I think it's a great idea, and it's something you can stand behind. We'll set it up with complete transparency, focusing on ethical investing, and I'll handle the compliance and legal structure. No more hidden agendas. No more secrets. Her words hit me with a sense of relief I hadn't expected. I had been so consumed by the betrayal that I hadn't fully considered what moving forward would look like. Now, with Lily's support, it felt like I had the chance to rebuild. Not just my professional life, but my sense of integrity. We agreed to collaborate on the fund. In the weeks that followed, I found myself working closely with her, developing the fund structure, and putting together a team. It felt good to be working on something real, something that aligned with my values, and I knew that this was the fresh start I needed. Every decision I made was a chance to distance myself from the toxic mess that Candace had left behind. Through our meetings, Lily and I grew closer. She wasn't just the sister of the woman who had betrayed me. She was someone who understood the importance of integrity in business, and her commitment to that vision made me realize that there were people in the world who valued transparency as much as I did. Together, we began to create a fund that would focus on ethical investments, supporting companies that upheld high standards of accountability and transparency. It wasn't going to be easy, but with Lily's legal expertise and my knowledge of the industry, we were off to a strong start. As the months passed, the fund began to take shape. It grew faster than I had anticipated, attracting interest from investors who were eager to support a business that valued ethical practices over profit at any cost. We had built something real from the ashes of betrayal, and I couldn't be more proud of what we were creating. 6 months later, my fund had blossomed into something that was gaining significant traction. The success wasn't just financial, it was personal, too. I had found a renewed sense of purpose. With Lily's help, I had built something meaningful that aligned with my values. My reputation in the industry had strengthened, and I was more respected than I had been before. In the midst of all the scandal and heartbreak, I had come out on top. It was during one of our meetings that Lily brought up an idea that would further solidify the foundation we were building. "I've been thinking about a strategic partnership," she said, leaning across the table. "I have a small